You bought a new mower this spring, you ran it once, and now it is parked in the garage next to a flattened box while you decide whether the store will take it back. And if that is you, you have a lot of company. So here is the whole picture. What actually sends these machines back? Which numbers on the carton fall apart the second they touch real grass? How long you truly have to change your mind? And how to buy the next one so it stays bought. I have had a lot of mower decks upside down on sawhorses over the years, enough that I can usually tell what a machine has been through by looking at the wear pattern on the underside of the deck before I ever pull the plug wire. And the thing I keep running into lately is not broken mowers. It is disappointed ones. Perfectly functional machines that did not do the job the buyer thought they had paid for, which is a completely different problem and has a completely different fix. 3 things I want you to stay for. First, the runtime number printed on battery mower boxes. I am going to do the actual arithmetic on watt hours with you, and you will see why a machine advertised at an hour can quit on you in the mid-20s on a warm Saturday. Second, the return window, which is not one window. At Home Depot, gas-powered equipment carries a 30-day clock, while most battery and electric mowers get 90, and almost nobody reads that line before they buy. And third, near the end, a federal case out of Milwaukee, where 10 manufacturers put $65 million on the table over the power numbers they had been printing on mowers, and agreed to a decade of restrictions on how they label power. That decade is long over. Wait for that one, because the number on today's boxes is the direct descendant of the number that started it. Let me start with the thing everyone gets backwards. Most return mowers are not defective. Some are, and we will get to the recalls, because 2024 and 2025 were genuinely ugly years for that. But the ordinary return, the one clogging the back corner of the garden department every May, is a mismatch. The machine works exactly as designed. It just was not the machine for that yard, that slope, that grass, or that person's shoulder. And before I go further, let me be straight with you about the word millions, because I do not want to sell you a number I cannot stand behind. Nobody publishes a return rate for lawn mowers specifically. Not the retailers, not the manufacturers, not the trade groups. What we do have is a CPSC staff estimate, putting the walk-behind power mower market at roughly 5.5 million units a year in the United States, and the National Retail Federation's returns work, which put the overall retail return rate at 15.8% of sales in 2025, with online purchases running higher at an estimated 19.3%. Multiply those together, and you land in 7 figures. That is a reasonable inference, and I want you to hear it as an inference rather than as a counted fact, because that is what it is. Anyone who tells you the exact figure is guessing with more confidence than I am. Here is the mechanism underneath all of it, and once you see this, the rest of the video falls into place. When you buy a mower, you think you are buying a machine. You are not. You are buying a work rate. A mower has one job: to hold a blade at enough tip speed to cut cleanly, while dragging itself through a load that changes every 15 feet. Grass is not a constant. Thick, wet, tall, seed-headed grass is a hugely heavier load than short, dry grass, and the machine has to find that extra energy from somewhere. A gas engine finds it by burning more fuel and dropping some RPM. A battery machine finds it by pulling more amps and eating its pack faster. Neither one gives you anything for free. The old hands in the small engine trade understood this in terms most people have forgotten. They did not talk about horsepower much. They talked about how a machine sounded when it loaded up, whether it kept its blade speed in the thick stuff, and whether the deck cleared the clippings or packed them. Deck design does as much work as the motor does. A deck is a fan. It lifts the grass, cuts it, and throws it. And if the airflow is wrong, the machine will bog on grass that a lesser-powered mower with a better deck sails through. Everything the box tells you is about the motor. Almost nothing on that box is about the deck, which is half the machine. So let's walk the whole cycle in order, the way it actually happens. from the number that made you buy it to the moment you load it back into the truck. It starts with the power rating, and this is where the confusion is manufactured. On a gas mower, you will see engine displacement in cubic centimeters. On some, torque in foot-pounds. On battery machines, you will see something stranger, a claim that the mower is equivalent to a gas engine of a certain size. You will see a 21-inch cordless mower described as being in the 160 cc class, or matching a 200 cc or gas mower, sometimes right beside a torque figure. And I want to be fair here. The good ones genuinely do perform in that range. The professional tool testers who actually put these side by side in the same grass have measured torque figures in the 10 and 11 foot-pound region on the top cordless walk-behinds. And those are legitimately strong machines that will embarrass a cheap gas mower. That part is real. What is not real is the idea that a gas equivalent rating is a specification. Displacement is a measurable physical fact. The engine either displaces 160 cubic centimeters, or it does not. An equivalence claim is a marketing comparison to a machine that is not in the room, under conditions nobody has to disclose. Two mowers can claim the same equivalence and behave nothing alike in your yard. Hold that thought. It comes back with teeth. Now the single biggest driver of returns, and the one I promised you the math on. Runtime. Battery capacity is measured in amp hours, but amp hours by themselves are meaningless across different voltages. What you actually want is watt hours, volts multiplied by amp hours, because that is the energy in the pack. A 56-volt battery rated at 10 amp hours holds roughly 560 watt hours. That is the whole tank. Every minute of mowing spends from it. So what does mowing cost? A 21-inch walk behind pushing through normal residential grass is drawing something in the region of a kilowatt to a kilowatt and a half at the motor, more in heavy going, less on a dry maintenance cut. Take that 560 watt-hour pack, divide it by a real-world draw, and you get somewhere in the mid-20s to mid-30s of minutes. Not 60. And I want to be careful and honest here, because manufacturers do not generally publish the load conditions behind their runtime claims. So I am reasoning from energy, not reading from a spec sheet. But the direction of the answer is not in doubt. The advertised figure is a best case. Short, dry grass, level ground, no bagging, often a lower power eco setting, on a fresh pack in mild weather. Your yard is not the best case. Bagging costs energy, because now the deck has to move air as well as cut. Self-propel costs energy. Hills cost a lot of energy. Heat costs energy, because a hot pack sags. Wet grass is brutal. And a first cut of the season on grass that got away from you can have your number all by itself. So the machine dies at 26 minutes with a third of the lawn standing, and the owner concludes the mower is defective. It is not defective. It is honest. The claim was the thing that lied. Here is the part that never makes it into the argument, though. For an awful lot of people, that same mower is genuinely the right call. If you have got a quarter acre of turf, 25 minutes is more mowing than you need. The machine starts every time. It stores on its end against the garage wall, and you never touch a can of gas again. The people who love these things are not wrong. They just bought one that fit. The people returning them bought a number. Then there is weight, which surprises people. A big battery pack is not light, and cordless self-propelled machines have been creeping heavier for years as capacities grow. On flat ground, you never notice. On a slope, or turning at the end of every pass around a flower bed, or lifting the thing up 2 porch steps, you notice within one cut. That is a quiet return driver nobody writes on the box. And a short one, because it deserves about 4 sentences. A meaningful share of returns are mowers that were damaged before the owner ever touched them. Direct-to-door shipping on a 70-pound boxed machine does not always end well. Bent handle tubes, cracked side discharge chutes, missing hardware bags. That is not the manufacturer's design failing. That is freight. It still ends up at the return desk. Now the return window, and pay attention to this because it is the part with a deadline on it. At Home Depot, gas-powered equipment, mowers, chainsaws, blowers, log splitters, tractors, must go back within 30 days of purchase. Most other tools and electric equipment run to 90. And if you pay with their consumer credit card or a commercial account, the 90 extends out to a full year. But that extension does not touch the 30-day gas rule. Lowe's runs its own list, with a shorter window on outdoor power equipment and a 90-day carve-out for certain electric outdoor gear. The point is not to memorize any one retailer's policy, because they revise them. The point is that the mower category has a shorter fuse than almost anything else in the store, and it is the category people are least likely to test immediately. Think about how this plays out. You buy a mower on a rainy weekend in early April because it is on sale. The grass is not really growing yet. You get around to the first real cut in the second week of May. That is 5 or 6 weeks. On a gas machine, you are outside the window before you have learned anything about the mower at all. There is a second trap in there. The generous windows generally apply to items in new, unused condition, defects accepted. And a mower that has had fuel in it cannot be shipped back at all. Home Depot says plainly that items using flammable liquids or gases cannot be returned through the mail even after draining, and have to go to a store. So if you fueled it, ran it, and then decided against it, you are not in the easy lane anymore. You are having a conversation at a desk. Now, before we go on, that is 5 things covered, and the pattern is already obvious if you squint at it. Every single return driver so far comes down to the same gap. What the buyer was told the machine would do versus what it does under load in a real yard. Nobody lied about a part failing. From here, it gets harder, because the next stretch is about machines that genuinely did fail, and about a category of mower that barely existed 5 years ago and is generating its own fresh wave of regret. And I still owe you that court case. Quick thing while we are at the halfway shelf. If this is useful, subscribe. That is all, no speech attached to it. Then stay with me, because the recall numbers coming up are bigger than most people realize. And the remedy one manufacturer offered tells you more about how these machines are built than the recall itself does. Let's talk about what happened to the gas side, because a lot of returns are people bouncing off a market that changed under them while they were not shopping. Honda ended lawnmower production. Their North Carolina plant stopped building mowers in September 2023, remaining stock sold through 2024, and their stated reasoning was stricter environmental regulations, shifting customer preferences, and focusing on more profitable products. Whatever you think about that, it removed the machine an entire generation of people bought without thinking, the one you handed down. Briggs & Stratton, the company whose engine sat on top of half the mowers in America, filed Chapter 11 in July 2020 and was bought out of it by a private equity firm for around $550 million. The company still exists and still builds engines. But an industry that consolidates under new ownership while its volume shrinks is not an industry that is adding cost to its products. Meanwhile, California's rules on small off-road engines took effect for model year 2024 machines, requiring most newly manufactured equipment in that class to be zero emission. Your existing gas mower is not banned, and used equipment is not banned. That part gets wildly distorted online, but it changed what manufacturers build for the whole country, because nobody engineers a separate product line for one state that size. And then there is what happened to the engines themselves. Look at a modern budget walk-behind, and you will find no oil drain plug. You tip it to drain if you drain it at all, and a lot of them are sold under a just check and add philosophy, where the manufacturer says you never need to change the oil, only top it up. The engineering reasoning behind it is not stupid. Topping up from the add mark to the full mark replaces a meaningful fraction of the oil volume and refreshes the additive package. And these engines are rated for a service life in the low hundreds of hours, which for a homeowner is a decade. The catch, and it is a real one, is that the whole thing depends on the air filter and plug being serviced, so contamination never gets in. The people who will not change oil are exactly the people who will not change an air filter. So the promise quietly assumes a maintenance habit that its own target customer does not have. Add fuel to that. Ethanol blends absorb moisture and degrade in storage, which is why so many of these mowers arrive at the shop in spring with a carburetor full of varnish, and an owner convinced the machine is junk. And E15, the 88-octane pump, is not approved for use in non-road small engines. That yellow label at the pump matters. If you have got a mower that ran badly from day one, before you decide it is a lemon, find out what went in the tank. Now the recalls, because 2024 and 2025 were not a normal couple of years. In February 2025, CPSC announced a recall of about 217 of 500 Ryobi 40-volt brushless 21-inch cordless walk-behind mowers in the United States, plus another 28,400 in Canada, because a push-on connector inside the power head could overheat. 97 reports of overheating, 5 fires, 2 minor burn injuries. Sold through Home Depot and outlet stores from January 2021 to January 2025. Look at the remedy, because that is the tell. Owners were instructed to contact the company for instructions on how to disable the mower and receive a free replacement. Not a repair, not a part. The fix was that the machine gets bricked and swapped because there was nothing serviceable inside it to correct. In 2024, DeWalt recalled roughly 46,200 battery walk-behind mowers in the U.S., with another 9,600 in Canada, because water getting into the handle support with the battery installed could stop the mower from shutting off when you release the bail, and in some cases let it start without the key. That is the exact failure the federal safety standard exists to prevent. In January 2025, Kawasaki recalled about 39,000 John Deere Z-Track zero turns over a voltage regulator that could fail and overheat the engine, with 5 fires reported and 26 reports of melting or smoking, on machines that sold for $8,000 to $11,500. And more recently, DR Power pulled walk-behind wide-cut mowers for violating the mandatory blade control standard outright. Blades that could run without the control engaged, or keep running after release. And a newer category worth watching: robot mowers. The wire-free ones navigate by satellite correction, and the marketing promises you unbox it, map the yard on your phone, and walk away. In open sky on a simple lot, they are remarkable. Under a mature tree canopy, in a narrow side yard between 2 houses, or against a metal roof, the position fixed degrades, and the machine pauses, wanders, or drives home and sits on the dock. That is not a defect either. It is physics meeting a suburban lot with 3 oaks in it. Prices in this category span from around $600 to $4,000, which is a huge spread for products that look similar in a photo. And expectations built on the $4,000 machine's reviews get carried on to the $600 one. 2 extras before the part that will annoy you, because they will save you money regardless of what you own. First, a sharp blade is worth more than a bigger motor. A dull blade tears grass instead of slicing it, which leaves a ragged white-tipped lawn that browns off in 2 days, and it forces the machine to work far harder for a worse result. Sharpening a blade costs you 20 minutes and a file. I have watched people spend hundreds of dollars upgrading to a more powerful mower to solve a problem that was 1 dull blade and a deck packed with 3 seasons of dried clippings. Second, and this one is a genuine piece of good engineering hiding in plain sight. That bar you have to hold against the handle, the one that kills the mower the instant you let go, which everyone finds mildly annoying. exists because of a federal standard that took effect in June 1982. It requires the blade to come to a complete stop within 3 seconds of you releasing the control, and requires continuous contact for the blade to keep turning. That standard was written to address tens of thousands of blade contact injuries a year, most of them to hands and feet, and a grim number of amputations. So the next time you are irritated at reaching for the bail handle again, that is the sound of the single most effective piece of safety regulation ever applied to a garden tool doing its job. Some safety features are theater. That one is not. Now, the part I have been holding. Between 1994 and 2010, when you walked into a store and picked up a mower, the biggest number on it was horsepower. That is the number you compared. That is the number that justified the higher price. And a wave of class actions, more than 65 of them, eventually consolidated in federal court in Milwaukee, alleged that those numbers were overstated, built on a theoretical gross figure rather than what the engine actually delivered in the machine you bought. In 2010, it settled. Briggs & Stratton, along with Deere, Sears, Toro, Electrolux, Husqvarna, and Tecumseh, put $51 million into a cash fund. Honda added $7.5 million, Kohler $3.5, Kawasaki $3, bringing the combined cash value to around $65 million. Class members could claim up to $35 for a walk-behind and up to $75 for a rider. The settling companies also agreed to injunctive relief governing power labeling for the next 10 years, agreed to a certified power rating standard with uniform testing whose results would be made public, and Briggs agreed to have its engines certified by the Society of Automotive Engineers. Sit with the shape of that. The number on the front of the box, the one you used to choose between two machines, the one that made you pay $80 more. That number required a decade-long federal consent to fix. Here is what I want you to notice, and it is not the money. It is the 10 years. 10 years from 2010 ran out in 2020. And look at what is on the box now. Displacement, which tells you the size of the engine, and nothing about how well it converts that into blade speed. Torque, quoted at a peak that lasts a moment. And on battery machines, a gas equivalent claim, a comparison to an engine that does not exist, in a machine you cannot test, under conditions nobody is required to state. Nobody broke a rule here. That is exactly the point, and it is why cold arithmetic beats outrage. The lesson the industry took from a $65 million settlement was not that comparative power claims mislead buyers. It was that horsepower specifically was the word that got them sued. So the word changed and the function did not. The number is still there to make you feel that one machine is more capable than another, and it is still not a figure you can hold anybody to. And you are the one who eats the difference. Not in a lawsuit. In a 30-day window you did not know you were on, with a machine that stops halfway across the yard and a receipt that has aged out. The company got its sale in March. You found out in May. You cannot fix that from the outside. What you can do is stop letting that number make the decision. Once you know that every power and runtime claim on the carton is an unregulated comparison, you start asking the only questions that survive contact with your lawn. How much grass? How steep? How thick? How long have I got? That sentence on the box stops working on you the moment you know what it is for. Let me step back for a second because there is something bigger underneath this. We talk a lot about things not being built like they used to be, and there is truth in it, but I think it misses the actual loss. The real thing we gave up is judgment. There was a time when buying a machine meant knowing how to size one. You looked at the deck, you listened to it under load. You asked what the guy down the road ran and whether it held up. That skill was ordinary. It was passed across a fence in about 4 minutes. What replaced it is a number printed by the party with the most to gain from your believing it. And the trouble with outsourcing judgment is that you cannot borrow it back when you need it. You're standing in an aisle with two boxes, and the only tool you have left for telling them apart is the thing on the front of the box. The good news is that judgment is learnable, and it is cheap to learn. Measure your lawn once and you will never be sold a Runtime story again. Understand that a deck is a fan, and you will stop believing the motor is the machine. Learn what a mower sounds like when it is loading up properly versus struggling, and you will know more about a machine in one pass than the spec sheet will ever tell you. None of that requires tools, money, or permission. It just requires deciding that the number is not going to do your thinking for you anymore. So here is how you actually do this. A procedure, not a rule of thumb, because your yard is not mine. Step 1, tonight. Measure. Pace out your turf and get a real number in square feet. Most people badly overestimate. A tenth of an acre is about 4,250 square feet. A quarter acre is around 10,900. Then time yourself on your next cut. Those two numbers are the entire specification you actually need, and you will have both by tomorrow evening. Step 2. Match energy to area, not equivalence to ego. If you are going battery, work in watt hours. Multiply the pack voltage by the amp hours, and compare that number across machines, instead of comparing amp hours at different voltages. Then assume the real-world runtime is meaningfully below the advertised figure, and ask whether the remainder still covers your yard with margin on the worst week of spring. If it does not, you either need more energy or a second pack, and it is far cheaper to know that in the aisle than in the middle of the lawn. Step 3. Before you pay, ask the return window for that exact category at that exact store, and write the deadline on the receipt in pen. Gas and battery are frequently not on the same clock. Step 4. Cut the day you buy it, not the weekend after. Fuel it if it is gas, charge it fully if it is not, and mow the worst part of your yard first. The slope, the shady thick patch, the strip by the fence. If the machine is wrong for you, you want to find out on day 1 while every option is still open. Step 5. Run the checklist before you call it a lemon. Blade sharp and balanced. Deck scraped clean underneath. Correct fuel with no ethanol confusion. Air filter clean. Cutting height not set so low you are scalping and choking the deck. Fresh fuel if it has sat. I would say a solid share of the machines people are ready to return are one of those 5 things and nothing more. Step 6. If you are keeping it. End of season storage decides next spring. Fresh oil or a proper top-up. Fuel stabilized or the system run dry. Blade off and sharpened. Battery stored around a partial charge somewhere that does not freeze or bake. The mower that will not start in April is almost always a decision made the previous October. Do step 1 tonight. 10 minutes with your phone and a tape measure, and by the end of it you will know something about your own property that most homeowners never bother to find out. And you will never again be standing in an aisle guessing. Now I want to hear from you, and specifically I want the uncomfortable version. Tell me about the one you returned. What you bought, what you thought it was going to do, the exact moment you knew it was not going to work out, and what the whole exercise cost you in time, fuel, or dignity at the returns desk. I am asking for the confession rather than the recommendation, because the confessions are where the useful information lives. Anyone can tell you which mower they like, but the story of a bad purchase tells the next person exactly which claim not to believe. Mention where you are while you're at it. Bermuda grass and Texas heat and cool season fescue in Ohio are 2 completely different jobs, and a machine that is perfect in one is a bad joke in the other. And I know a few of you are already typing, because you have run the same 25-year-old machine since your kids were small, and you think this whole conversation is people being soft. Come and say so. Tell me what it is, tell me what you have replaced on it, and tell me honestly whether you would buy the current version of it today. That argument is more interesting than agreement. I read the replies. Not all of them, not fast, but I get through more than you would think. And the corrections I get from people who fix these for a living have changed how I explain things more than once. There is one thread I deliberately did not pull on today. Everything we covered assumes the battery in your machine still holds what it held on day one. And I am not convinced anybody outside the manufacturers has good data on what a lithium pack in a mower really looks like after 5 hot summers in a garage that hits 110 degrees. I keep running into owners with wildly different experiences and no way to reconcile them, and I would rather sit on it than guess in front of you. When I have got something solid, you will hear it. Subscribe if you want to be there when I do. Until then, measure the lawn, sharpen the blade, and read the receipt before you read the box.